The contaminated water crisis in Flint, Michigan is a wake-up call across America. We have to have protections in place when it comes to lead contamination. My heart goes out to the people of Flint, Michigan, dealing with the consequences of this preventable man-made crisis. The Senate needs to do something to help the people of Flint. We must also recognize that children across America are poisoned every day by lead, and we need to do something about it to protect these families. Chicago Tribune author or reporter Michael Hawthorne recently authored some articles on this issue, revealing hundreds of cases of childhood lead poisoning stemming from different sources than Flint. Lead poisoning due to lead-based paint in federally subsidized housing. That's right, Mr. President, housing we own as taxpayers, housing we manage as a federal government, and housing which is dangerous to the children that are living there. Exposure to high levels of lead or lead poisoning can be devastating to a child, causing irreparable damage. And because the children who live in this housing are from low-income families, many minority families, lead poisoning can further trap these kids in the cycles of poverty, violence, and inequality. Families are often stuck in homes even after the lead is discovered, with no place else to go. That's why Senator Bob Menendez of New Jersey and I joined together to introduce the Lead Safe Housing for Kids Act to ensure safe, affordable housing by reducing the threat of lead exposure and lead poisoning. Congressional Representatives Keith Ellison, Mike Quigley from my state of Illinois, Brenda Lawrence, and Dan Kildee have introduced companion legislation in the House. Since the enactment of federal lead policies in the early 1990s, lead poisoning rates have fallen. This is a big success story. However, the risk of lead poisoning from lead-based paint hazards found in homes continues to threaten kids who are living in housing built many times before 1978. This is especially true in Illinois. But it's a problem in Cleveland, Buffalo, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, and many other cities. HUD regulations are outdated, ineffective, and based on old scientific discoveries that haven't been updated. Under current HUD regulations, a landlord is not required to remediate a home, make it safe, where lead-based paint hazards have been found until a child's blood lead level is 20 micrograms of lead per deciliter. That standard from HUD is 4 times the standard of the Centers for Disease Control. When I asked Secretary Castro of Housing and Urban Development, now why would we have such a disparity? Why would you allow lead contamination of a child 4 times the level of what the Center for Disease Control says is acceptable? He said, I have no answer, and we're going to change it. It's just wrong. I salute him for acknowledging that, and I hope to help him in any way I can to change this regulation. Also, we need better inspections. The inspections before a home qualifies to be part of the federal program are cursory visual inspections. There's no way you can discover the presence of lead that may be dangerous to the occupants of that home or to the kids unless you have a much more thorough inspection. And in addition to that, once we've discovered there's lead in a residence, we've got to find another place for that family to live, unless that lead can be remediated quickly. No one knows this better than Lanice Walker. She moved out of public housing in 2012 and into a home with a housing choice voucher. What an opportunity for her family, a new home. But less than 5 months after she and her family moved in, her 4-year-old daughter, 4 years old, was diagnosed with lead poisoning. Lanice was aware of the dangers of lead to kids. She asked the Chicago Housing Authority for permission to move. They said no. Why? Because her daughter's blood lead level hadn't met the HUD standard. It met the CDC standard, which was 1/4, but hadn't met the HUD standard. So despite her daughter having a blood lead level twice of what the CDC considers to be dangerous, they would move her out of her house. So she stayed. And within the next year, another child in the house was diagnosed with lead poisoning too, and then another one. Before she moved out, all 9 of Lanice's children had elevated blood lead levels. Even so, she only received permission to move after legal advocates intervened. This could have been avoided if her home had been properly inspected. Sadly, this isn't an isolated incident. Since 2012, in Chicago alone, at least 180 kids in Section 8 housing have fallen victim to this mismatch in the blood level standards. After hearing Lanisa's story, the Chicago Housing Authority said it would voluntarily recognize the CDC guidelines, even though HUD didn't require them to. That's a good step. However, families all across America need the same relief that will come when HUD standards are changed. That's what this bill is all about. I commend it to my colleagues and hope they will look at it carefully in an effort to try to make sure that public housing is safe. What did we learn in Flint, Michigan? We think 9,000 children were exposed to the lead in that water, that it's had an impact on them, for some brain damage that cannot be reversed. Who will answer for that? The poisoning of 9,000 children. How can we answer to the next generation that faces this hazard if we don't take this important step?